Hiya! So far in music theory from the ground up, we've learned how to identify scales, chords, keys, and a few strategies for learning to name the notes on a fretboard. And in this lesson, I want to show you two ways to learn scales on the fretboard. So these are just two approaches that work. But there are many ways to learn scales, so the best thing is always to learn things in multiple ways, but these are just two ways that have worked for me, that have helped a lot. So the first approach deals with playing scales up and down one string, and the other approach, after that, focuses on learning 3-note per string scale shapes that use all 6 strings and are really efficient technically, so they can be played quickly. On one hand, we're really dealing with scales on a music theory and understanding ingrained level, and then we're moving on to shapes once we've got a good foundation. So before I explain the two methods, I want to tell you why it's important to learn scales on the guitar in the first place. So when you know your scales really well and you can play them all over the fretboard, it's a lot easier to stay within a key and sound good without thinking. And then when playing scales becomes effortless, you don't have to worry about where your fingers are going, so you can just listen to what you're doing, which makes it easier to make more creative decisions and even play out of the key in a confident and interesting way. So really, by conforming to the scales, it gives you actually a lot of options and appreciation of what's beyond the scales. So here's the first approach that I want to talk about. We're going to take any scale and play it up and down one string. In this approach, we're going to focus on naming the notes and really thinking about which notes we're playing. So if I say, okay, let's do G minor on the low E string, the first thing we're going to do is name the notes in the key of G minor so we can get our G minor scale to happen. So we learned earlier that minor scales have half steps between the second and third notes and the fifth and sixth notes. For natural minor, the half steps are between second and third and fifth and sixth. And what this means is that everything else is a whole step. So we'll start on G, on our 3rd fret low E string. This is our first scale degree, so this is the 1. And we go up a whole step from 1 to 2, G to A. Then we go to a half step in the minor scale from 2 to the flat 3, which is A to B flat. And we go up a whole step from 3 to 4 in our minor scale, which is B flat to C. Then a whole step from 4 to 5, C to D. A whole step from 5 to flat 6, that's D to E flat. And then we have a whole step from 6 to 7, E flat to F. And in our minor scale here, we've got a whole step from 7 back to 1, F to G, or 7 to 8, however you prefer to call it. So here's the whole scale. So now you go up and down the scale a few times until you're more comfortable with it and you're not thinking quite as hard just to get it to happen, right? And then we're going to go every other note like this. So we're going to go G, B flat, D, F, F, D, B flat, G. And so we cover all our bases. We're going to do the same thing starting from the second note so we can play all the notes we just skipped. A, C, E flat, G, G, E flat, C, A. So you can practice going like this. It helps you visualize what's going on here on one string a lot better. And then you can do it in thirds, which is when you go up a third, down a second, and then up a third, and then down a second, and up a third. Down a second, up a third, down a second, up a third, down a second, up a third. So it looks like this. If you mix things up like this, the scale starts to really sink in. Instead of just going up and down, moving around in different patterns and formations. So you might wonder why we bother learning to play up and down one string instead of starting with more conventional shapes. The reason for this is When you're dealing with one string at a time, it helps you see the whole steps and half steps easier because you're dealing with a two-dimensional plane. If you go to the left, your sound is going lower. If you go to the right, your sound is getting higher, and there's nothing else to it besides that. And it's just easier to internalize than a bunch of shapes right off the bat. If you do play a scale that goes too high, for example, D major on the low E string, and it just goes up beyond where you have frets, just jump down an octave and finish the scale lower, like this. So here's the D major scale up one octave on the low E string, and I'm going to run out of frets here, so I'm going to have to jump and play the next note in the scale down an octave. So D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So I can't play C sharp D up here because it doesn't exist, so I jump down. So this next approach is best when it's paired with the one string approach. And it's centered around building technique and just covering all the strings. So we're going to learn to play our major and minor scales using 3-note per string shapes that include all 6 strings in them. So first let's play the major shape. We're going to do this starting on G. So here's the G major scale using 3 notes per string. And we're going to actually play the G major scale up 2 octaves, and then we're going to play 3 extra notes from the scale so that we can include all 6 strings. So it's going to be like this: G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, there's octave number 1, then A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, that's the second octave, and then here are the 3 extra notes, A, B, C. So that way we've got all 6 strings. So once again, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C. Practice playing this major shape up and down until it's comfortable. And you can use the shape for any major scale. So if you want to play an A major scale, you just shift that shape up and start it on an A instead of on a G, and you'll be playing A major. So here's the A major scale. You'll see it's the same exact shape. A, B, C sharp, E. It's just on different frets, but it's the same shape. And here's the 3-note per string minor shape. Let's do G minor. Memorizing shapes is much easier when it's paired with a good knowledge of the notes on the fretboard and music theory, so don't limit yourself to just one approach. After you learn a scale, improvise melodies with it and play it over backing tracks so that you're using it in a musical context right away. And for the G major scale, you can play over G major backing tracks and also E minor backing tracks, because as we learned in earlier lessons in this series, every major key has a relative minor. So for G major, the relative minor is E minor. The relative minor starts on the 6th note of the major scale. So the G major scale, G, A, B, C, D, E. E is the 6th note, and that's where its relative minor starts, E minor. So that's just a little bit of review there, just so you know which backing tracks you can use. So if you play the A major scale, you can play it over an A major backing track, or its relative minor, F sharp minors backing tracks. So get out those backing tracks, jam with the scales, learn them in multiple ways, try a bunch of approaches. If you see one online from someone else, which you inevitably will, go for it, man. There's really just a lot to gain from trying a bunch of stuff.